Good morning, everyone. Today is my third day on my video for my memory quilt in progress. Blocks on point with sashing. And so there is my quilt up on the wall. And so yesterday I sent some photos over to my client and we ended up moving just a couple of blocks around. And now she loves that layout, and so that's what we're going to go with. Look, I have the door open. It's so pretty outside today. I'm going to enjoy the last few weeks in my shop, and hopefully the weather is still this nice, although we're supposed to have some storms coming in. So yesterday I went and bought some fabric, and so, oh, the shadow in here. You might not be able to see this blue fabric. As pretty as the blue is, I think the lighting is not that great to see it. So we've chosen this blue fabric for the sashing. And this is where we are starting off this morning. So I have the go ahead and start assembling her quilt. So let's walk over and talk about how I'm going to approach sewing together this quilt. And I'm sorry if the camera is shaky. So traditionally we would have blocks that go across from left to right, and we would just sew straight across. This quilt is going to be a little bit different because our blocks are on point. And so we're going to approach this a little bit differently. And I think that you could do this one of two ways. You could start on the right side and sew these together as rows, diagonal, just like that. Or you could start on the left side and do the same thing. That would be a row, that would be a row, and then that would be a row. So I don't really think that it matters which side you start from, but those will be our rows. They're just going to, instead of going from left to right, we're going to go diagonally from top to bottom. And so that's what I'm going to do. Of course, we're going to be adding some sashing in there, so I've decided a good sashing size for this style quilt to keep the same kind of feeling of the example that I shared in the first video. I think I'm going to cut my sashing at 1.5 inches wide, and so the sashing will finish at 1 inch in between all the blocks, and I think that would be the perfect size for the size blocks that I've cut. And it won't add a terrible amount of size to the quilt. It will make this quilt a little bit bigger, but it won't be huge. It'll still be the throw size that she was wanting. And so that's where we are. So I'm going to go ahead and cut up some fabric into some strips, and we'll pick up after that. Okay, so here we are. I've cut 2 stacks of 1.5 inch strips. You know, usually I do the math before I head to the fabric store, but yesterday we had home inspection on our house and it was a crazy day, and so I ended up at Joann Fabrics without doing any math, and so I just purchased 3 yards. I think that's going to be more than enough to do this quilt and even have a little bit left over to put in a stash for another project. So out of a yard, I cut 2 stacks of 1.5 inch strips. And if I need more, then it's there and I can cut more. If not, then I can cut my borders from the remaining 2 yards. So we'll see. I might have to end up cutting more strips. And so let's talk about the way to approach sewing together this quilt again. Because with the sashing, I think you have a couple of different options. The way that I'm going to do it is I'm going to pull off 1 row at a time. So I'll pull off all of these blocks going all the way down to this one right here. I'm going to attach a sashing strip to the right side of each one of these blocks. So a sashing strip will go here on this block, and then here on this block, here on this block, and so on all the way down the row. And then I will attach those blocks all together as my row. And then once my row is complete, I will piece together a 1.5 inch strip and sew it to the bottom of this row all the way down. I think that's how I'm going to approach this quilt. However, I do think that you could do it differently. You could add the sashing strip, let's use this block as an example, to the right, and then while you're still there at the machine, you could attach, press that open and then attach another 1.5 inch strip to this block and press that open. And so your block will look a little bit different, but then when you piece together your row, your sashing going diagonal in between this row and this row will already be there. To me, that seems like a little bit more pressing and a little bit more time at the machine, and I'm pretty good and accurate at attaching a smaller strip in between the rows, and so that's how I'm going to approach that. And so maybe I will take some photos of putting together the first row so you get a better idea of how that looks. But this is where we are. I think it's going to go together pretty quick at this point. So this is exciting. So here we are at the sewing machine. Now comes the fun part after all of the prepping work for this quilt has been done. We stabilized all the clothing pieces, cut out the blocks, got them all arranged, and then I just finished cutting out the sashing strips. These are just 1.5 inch strips that are cut the width of the fabric, so they're really long. They're like, let's see, it was 43 inch wide fabric. So yeah, I'll get a lot of use out of one of these strips. And I just thought I'd show you how fast it's going to be adding the sashing to the right side of the block. Here's my first row. It's got 3 pieces in it. And this is where we are. And I'm just going to show you how quick the sashing blocks will go together, or the sashing on the blocks. I'm going to bring over my first piece. And we're just going to do some chain piecing with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just like this, we can bring it in. Make sure to keep that lined up. I'm almost to the end of that block. I'm going to go ahead and cut this piece off. And I'm going to cut it with some extra hanging over because I can always square this up. Just like that. So there's the first piece. Now we'll attach the sashing to the right side of this block. Go ahead and cut this off. I guess you could leave this and just attach your next block underneath. For me, I have a little bit more control doing it this way. And now we will bring in, let's see. Actually, nope, that's it. We don't need to bring in this third piece, and I'll show you why here in just a minute. So So there's our two sashing pieces. I just pressed them open and squared them up. So now they finished at 10.5 inches, just like the blocks. And so this is diagonal, just like the row would be up on the design wall. So now we can piece this piece together just like that, and this piece together just like that to form our row. Now, the other way that I mentioned at the beginning of this video that you could approach this quilt, instead of piecing it at this point, you could go ahead and attach a small strip to this block and press that open, a small strip to the bottom of this block and press that open, and a strip to the bottom of this block and press that open, and that will give you your diagonal sashing that will run between your rows. So if you wanted to do it that way, you most certainly could. I plan on going ahead and piecing this together as a row just like that, and then taking a longer strip and just sewing it to the bottom of my row. Once I do that, I'll put it up on the wall and show you where I'm at, and maybe you'll get a better idea of how that will look. Okay, here we are. That first row is sewn together. And then I went ahead and added the diagonal sashing piece between the first row we sewed together in the very corner, up in the right hand corner. And this is how we are looking. So now I'll just pull off row by row and add the sashing in between the blocks, and then the long diagonal sashing in between the rows. And I'll come back at the end of the day and we'll see how much I get done. It's super nice today. I have the door open, so I just plan on turning on some music and sewing away. And here we are, my quitting time for the day. You can see I made all this progress. I'd say I'm about halfway done, maybe a little bit less than halfway, because I just realized that lighthouse block is on upside down. Of course it is, after it's already attached to the rest of the quilt. So I'll have to take off that last row that I just put on, which is this one here, and flip that block around, but that'll happen in the morning. It got really hot out today, but I did not turn on the air conditioning. Just last week I had the heater on. It's about 92 here in my little studio. So maybe tomorrow I'll turn the AC on. So this is where I'm at. If you have any questions up until this point, I'd love to try to help. You can leave them down in the comment section below. Let me show you how much sashing stuff I have left. So out of my yard of fabric, I have this many pieces of sashing left, and I have a whole bunch of little scrap pieces that have been trimmed off, and so more than likely I'll need to cut a few more of the sashing strips as well. Okay, it's off to cook some dinner, and I hope you have a great evening. We'll probably see you tomorrow. Bye everyone.